Hello everyone, welcome to our video today, and in this video we are going to talk about the best 5 marches or the top 10 commanders for free-to-play and low spenders. Now recently we did a video where we covered all the commanders and the marches and equipment all the big players are using with very high KP. Now I noticed that in the comment sections you guys mentioned that some of those marches are kind of unrealistic for you if you're free to play or if you're a low spender, especially because all of those players are using 7 marches. So if you had to concise them down, what should be your best 5 marches if you're free to play or low spenders and you're pretty much getting up to the 5 march situation when fighting in KvK, and in some cases you may be going to the 6th march as well, but that'll be pretty late in the KvK where it doesn't add as much value. So with that in mind, we thought we make a dedicated video for free to play and low spenders where we talk about the top 10 commanders. Now I'm gonna put that video link on the description as well as the card on top later on in the video towards the end of it, so that if you want to check that video out you can as well. Now the other thing that I wanted to talk about is in terms of choosing commanders, it's not just the 7 march versus 5 march situation. It's not necessarily about just cutting down from 14 commanders to 10 commanders. There's other factors to consider as well. So the first thing that I would want to mention in terms of making this video, the first thing that I had to consider is, does those commanders that the big players are using add value for free-to-play low spenders as well? What I mean by that is, in certain cases, say for example Trajan is a commander that I always use, but then I never bring out Trajan if I'm using only 5 marches. And then there is Tommy as well. So there are commanders like this where it's dedicated to buffing and debuffing. To some extent, I feel like they're not necessarily good for free-to-play players. I mean, it's good for the KD itself. If you're in a situation where there's no pressure on you to get a certain number of kills, within the KvK or something, then you can bring out those commanders, the buffers and the debuffers, and that definitely helps the KD. But then if you're under pressure to get your kills, I don't think in a 5 march situation those commanders add as much value. In those cases, the criteria that we thought would add value is, firstly, the commanders that you're choosing has to do a lot of damage. Preferably they need to do AoE damage, so that in the midst of fighting in a big buttermole you're still picking up some kills. So high damage is the first factor. Now the second factor that I thought would be important is the speed. So we like to recommend commanders for free-to-play and low spenders where your march speed is decent, higher, more cav marches, if you want to put it that way, because that way you can hit the targets, and then when you need to retreat, there's a good chance you can retreat even without having the high march speed that you get from maxing your crystal tech. The retreat is important because towards the end of your march's life, as in when your march goes red, you still don't get a big healing bill, but if your march is dead on the field, your healing bill goes up exponentially. So you rather try to bring your marches back before they're dead, and with that in mind, maybe faster marches does add value. Now the next thing that we wanted to talk about was accessibility. So in a way, avoiding MG commanders is probably a good idea if I'm making a list for free to play and low spenders, because if you're in a very inactive KD, yes, you may be getting some MG spots, but generally speaking that may be a bit difficult. And then the next factor is, we would like to think that everyone's going to max all the commanders, but sometimes that last skill is always difficult. So getting a commander to 5515 or 5551, something along those lines, is more realistic for everyone, but maxing can be a little challenging given how the last skill kind of needs half of the 700 gold that you need to max the commander, I guess. So these things being the main factors, one of the factors that I tried to get into the concept as well, which was marches that are not often targeted. Now I played around with this idea for quite a bit, and I would have to say that if I pick commanders that way, then it kind of doesn't serve the purpose of getting you the kills. So I have to kind of forget about the concept of, you know, not being targeted on the field, trying to pick commanders that doesn't get targeted, because there's a reason why they don't get targeted, because they're not doing any damage. That's the reason why they don't get targeted. Now, the last concept here is city popping, and I will mention that towards the end of the video, I guess. So when we are talking about the 5 marches, we are not necessarily taking into account that you may need to pick up some of your kills through city popping, as in Pakal Herald, Charles Herald, or Attila Takeda, those type of situations, because those commanders, you kind of know who are the commanders and what to do with it. So we'll touch base on that later on. Now, that was a massive introduction. I don't know whether we needed that much introduction, but then based on some of the comments that I see, I feel like unless I am a bit more detailed in the videos, then I think the concept kind of gets diluted, and maybe it's better to do an intro. Well, you know, we did a long intro. Anyways, let's get started with the commanders now. So the first commander that we had in mind is actually going to be Nevsky. So Nevsky is on the wheel, so obviously everyone has access to it. Nevsky, you can use that 5551. Obviously maxed is better, but then that 5551 kind of gives us a very good value, so you can start using him there. Without going too much into details, Nevsky makes the target take more damage. Nevsky isn't AoE, but the fact that when someone uses Nevsky to target an enemy, that enemy takes a lot of damage because of the defense reduction situation, and he does have cav health and skill damage increase and few other good bonuses in his pack. So Nevsky is our first commander. Now the second commander, we're probably gonna use it as a pair anyways, and the second commander is gonna be Joan. Now Joan got AoE 3 targets and a lot of damage. She does, on top of that, she does increase your rage, and then she does make the target take a bit more damage as well. Actually, in a way, she buffs your other commanders, but either way it ends up being more damage on the enemy, I guess. And then she does have damage bonuses, and then her fourth skill allows her to cast the first skill again, which is great. And then you can actually use her 5115 and then slowly work towards the max. 5115 probably gives you more than like 60-70% of value anyways, so that's why for free-to-play low spenders that may be a very favorable option. So you got 2 commanders there. Now for the third commander, what we would like to recommend is another cav commander. Oh my god, Rise of Cavalry. Well, that's the state of the game at the moment. With the new infantry commander coming up, is that gonna change? I actually don't think it's gonna change. Alright, so our third commander is XY. Now XY has no sort of defense, which is kind of bad, so you gotta play carefully with him. And for a while I didn't want to use him in my alt account, where I don't spend a lot, like very minimal spending. But then I realized that rather than trying to be tanky, going out, doing my damage, and then kind of retreating is something I can try to do with XY. I gotta be careful not to stay too long on the field, but either way. So on his first skill, again, the trend continues. So you got AoE, and then you're reducing the defense of the target, and then throughout his other skills he pretty much increases damage and reduces rage, so he can be doing fast skills. So definitely a good choice. Now if I am going with 3 cav commanders already, then you know the 4th one is going to be cav as well. So the only other high priority cav commander missing was XY. By the way, I mean William. By the way, on XY we didn't mention you can use XY with 5511. Again, obviously max is better. 5511 is pretty decent. If you want to use some skill resets, you can go with 5515 technically, and then work towards maxed. Him being maxed is not that important, but then you do get some more skill damage increase. Now going on to William, again 3 target damage, and then you do have the ability to increase your rage and defense as well, so definitely good with with William. You can use him from 5551. So guys, we got our 2 cav marches done out of the 5. So yes, I am recommending 2 cav marches. No, I'm not recommending more than that at this stage. So then we are going to move on to the other ones. Now when it comes to the next situation, it's going to be infantry, and we are going to talk about Guan and Scipio. Now I did have a very hopeful point of view about Sargon, not Tariq, but Sargon being a great commander. And I think Sargon is a great commander. I think Sargon is a must-have for people that are using at least 6 marches. But then if it comes to 5 marches, I just don't know whether he can replace what Scipio and Guan has to offer. Probably not. I probably have to say that Sargon comes the 3rd best in terms of infantry commander at this stage, but when he's released, we obviously can check it out. So at this stage, I'm still gonna go with Guan and Scipio. Now, Guan, everyone had access for a very long time, so we know that how his silence is quite unique, a lot of damage, and then he does get some march speed boost, a little bit of healing, a lot of damage factor. When he gets a shield, then he kind of does more damage as well, and then Skippy over here does give him a lot of those things, as in he does give the shield, and then on top of that, when the target is silenced, then Skippy increases the rage generation faster as well. So they kind of go together. Not necessarily you have to use them together though. So in a way, if we were taking out 2 infantry marches, we could have kind of split them apart. So at this stage, I'm thinking maybe just using 1 infantry march, and then obviously again you got the area of effect damage, 3 targets, high damage factor, enemy health reduction, and you got some sort of infantry health bonus as well. Yep, over here. So everything that you need in a commander, Scipio kind of has, and Guan, other than the tanky factor, has everything as well. So Guan, Scipio, definitely a good call. Now, if you did want, not that we are recommending it, but if you did want to bring a 2nd infantry march, you probably could consider Guan and Sargon and Scipio with Harold or someone else that you had in mind. But in our case, we are actually recommending just 1 infantry march. Now with Scipio, 5551 is definitely good enough. Maxed is great, obviously. With Guan, surprisingly, even from 5111, you can kind of use him, but then, you know, technically you should max him, I guess. So every commander, as much as we are mentioning the starting point, not necessarily saying that's where you stop. Every single commander, if you max, you get more value. Now, that's enough about infantry for now. Let's talk about archers. Obvious choice again. Actually, everything that I'm going to talk about in this video is going to be quite obvious, but then maybe it just reassures your understanding, or if you're new to the game, or if you're thinking about, I guess, going into investments, then this kind of validates what you were thinking anyway. So quite a bit obviousness here, but then you know meta can be obvious and then just because it's obvious doesn't mean we're going to change our recommendation, right? Anyways, so when it comes to Boudica, just like Nevsky, she is single target. She's probably the 2nd single target commander that we have talked so far, and she may be the last one in our list. Yep, I think she's the last one. Now, anyways, in terms of single target, so how can a single target commander be that great? Well, she is actually making the target take a lot more skill damage, 35% increase in skill damage. Her single damage factor is quite high as well, but on top of that, there's quite a few different things that comes in. So archer march speed, you kind of need that. Archer defense, that's very good as well. Skill damage taken reduction, so she is kind of tanky. She does do a little bit of healing as well, and then she can do more damage, and she can take away the debuffs from your march, or have a probability. So a lot of items in her inventory that makes her strong. So with Boudica, I think even a 5511 Boudica is probably better than a lot of the other archer commanders. So I wouldn't mind starting using her from 5.5, but obviously this is one of those that you would want to max, because a 10% increased damage factor is very good, and getting rid of the debuff from you is very good as well. So with Boudica, now a lot of people say that, or a lot of people actually use Boudica and Tomiris. I mean, not Tomiris, Boudica and Artemisia. So Artemisia is definitely good with Boudica. I think she's probably the best option with Boudica. So if you have Artemisia, then obviously you can use her. But in terms of our recommendation, rather than Artemisia, we are actually recommending as a secondary to Boudica to be YSG. And the reason why we are recommending that is to do with how we are talking about a free-to-play low spender situation where early KvK, obviously you just didn't play with epics, you probably invested in YSG, and Boudica on the field does a lot of damage, and not that they're tanky, none of them has any tankiness, which is the downside, so you gotta play a little careful with them, but then it does a lot of damage, so at least you're getting the kills. So RT makes the march a little tanky, so RT is probably the better choice, but then if you don't have RT, if you have YSG, you're just as good. So we are going to stick with YSG in terms of that recommendation. Now, how many marches have we gone through? We talked about 2 cavalry, we talked about 1 infantry, we talked about 1 archer. Now for the last march, we are going to go with a mixed troop march. Now in terms of the mixed troop march, I'm again going by the logic that you probably have Aethelflaed maxed by the time you come to Season of Conquest. I mean, surely you do. So Aethelflaed is not necessarily the best commander to use, I guess, in a 5 march situation. I mean, in a 7 march probably, in a 5 march probably not. Actually, even in a 7 march maybe a little questionable, but she does have some good debuffs. She does hit 5 targets, and then she can increase the damage factor that she has, which wasn't too high, 800 only, but it's 5 targets. Keep in mind, it's 5 targets, so not necessarily a bad choice. But this is more of a convenience thing if I'm talking about a free-to-play or low-spender account, because a maxed commander, legendary, and has good utilities, so why not? And then, as a secondary to Aethelflaed, I am going to recommend a commander that I actually don't have maxed, and that is a regret of mine. So I'm gonna scroll down the list and try to see if I can find him. Yes, I do, and that's Honda. Now, the reason why I do not have Honda maxed is because around the time Honda came out, I believe I was in early KvK, so I played KvK 2 like 3 times, which was a big mistake. But then he came out around that time, so I didn't get the wheels, and then by the time I worked on the other commanders that I had to max, it was a little too late. Now, why are we recommending Honda? One, Honda has a lot of damage. Even as a secondary, hitting 3 targets, 1250, that's a lot of damage. On top of that, for mixed troops, the main question is march speed. He does have some march speed here as well, 20% march speed increase. So 5.5 is already a good point, but obviously you get more out of it if you max, and the rest of the skills are not bad either. Now, in terms of that mixed troop march, if you wanted, you can technically replace that mixed troop march with a specialized city popping march. That wouldn't be a bad idea either, and this is what we were talking about at the start of the video. And when we talk about a city popping march, that's to do with picking up counter attack damage and so on. So on the left hand side, let me see if I can find them. Where is my Pakal? So I don't know how accessible Pakal is going to be for you, especially as a free to play or low spender, but if you have Pakal, Herald is from the wheel, so Herald is more accessible. So Pakal and Herald, if you can max both of them, you can city pop a lot, and then that helps you get a lot of kills. So dropping the Aethelflaed and Honda and instead using Pakal and Herald in terms of serving 2 purposes. So you can technically fight with them in the field as well. They're not the best, but not the worst. But then, rather than thinking about 12 commanders, then you at least have to think about 10 commanders, right? So you can go with them. Now, if Pakal is too hard for you to get, Charles is not a bad option either here. So Charles, I think, is almost on par with Pakal. The only thing with Pakal is Pakal has a way to debuff, take away the debuff that Herald does on himself. Charles doesn't have it, but Charles is quite tanky as well, so Charles will serve that purpose. For whatever reason, I can't find Charles on the left hand side, but I'm sure you know how Charles looks like. There you go, there's Charles. And then the other city popping situation is Attila and Takeda. Now, Attila and Takeda can do the same job, I guess, when it comes to city popping. On top of that, they can do city rallies as well, but then as a free-to-play low spender, I'm not too sure whether you should be doing city rallies. You should probably let the higher crystal tech players kind of do it, but either way, you have Attila Takeda as an option as well. Now, if you are replacing Aethelflaed and Honda, I would strongly recommend not replacing the other 4. But anyways, if you are replacing Aethelflaed and Honda, if you want to pick one of them too, I should probably recommend Pakal Herald as your first choice, Attila Takeda as your second choice, and and Charles and Harold as your third choice maybe. So just confirming again, Pakal Harold choice 1, Attila Takeda choice 2, and Charles and Harold choice 3. So you obviously pick one of them, and maybe going Attila Takeda is not a bad call because you're going with 2 Cav marches already. If you're using a third Cav march, then you can go for a Cav 5% defense skill, city skin, and that probably helps. If you're not using Attila Takeda, if you're using the Harold option instead, then maybe going for the skill damage option, the 5% Twilight Falls, which is accessible by all, that may not be a bad option either. Now, few of the commanders that we didn't talk about in this video, and maybe they could be, you know, kind of like crowd favorites as well. So I'll touch base on them. So one of them, actually one of my favorites as well, Alex. I used to think up until now, up until Scipio came out, Alex used to be, I think, a bit more higher rated. His first skill and second skill, with the damage that he does, and then debuffing enemies with 3 enemies for 4 seconds with 30% skill damage taken increase or something along those lines. That used to be really good, but then overall what Scipio offers, Alex probably lags behind a little bit, and the same applies for Leo as well. So Leo and Alex, both of them in different situations, I use them a lot, and I'm kind of regretting how... Actually, I'm not regretting how I maxed them. I'm kind of sad that I don't get to use them anymore, but both commanders maxed. But then if you're using 1 or even 2 infantry marches, these 2 commanders probably don't come into play anymore, as much as both of them you can use at 5.5.1.1. Only if you're using 3 infantry marches you can maybe consider them, I guess. And then the other sort of commanders that comes in is Ramses, Nebu. These are the commanders again. I mean, they're not bad commanders, just like Leo and Alex. If you have them, and Saladin in that category as well, if you have them, you can use them. They're not bad. But then if you don't have them, what I'm trying to say is the options that I'm recommending, at least in my eyes, they are probably better options than these commanders. Not necessarily these ones are bad, but if you have them, then obviously use them. A lot of people probably has Saladin 5.5.5.1 already. You can use him instead of using the XY if you like. So Saladin William kind of makes a decent pair as well. And then when it comes to I guess when it comes to the Leo Scipio situation, if you're Scipio, if you don't want to invest in Scipio straight away, if you want to wait a little bit and you got an Alex or a Leo, you can kind of use that. And then rather than I guess, actually I was gonna say, rather than using Boudica, you can use Ramses. Now that'll be a joke, so definitely go for Boudica. Don't use Ramses or Nebu in this scenario. Nebu YSG is actually a pretty good match. Actually, maybe Nebu YSG you can still use, but then you do need to get towards that Boudica because she helps you a lot. Now, again, just touching base on the debuffers, so that's gonna be a awkward talking point for me. I guess I'm recommending free-to-play players not to use buffers and debuffers, whereas without Crystal Tech, the debuffs actually take place just as much. So debuff is one thing that Crystal Tech doesn't affect. So why am I saying don't use them? Well, again, just clarifying, I'm saying don't use them if you're under pressure to get your kills, because these are these commanders, they're not gonna give you as many kills. Whereas I guess I have a decent amount of kills under this debuffer that I use all the time, but that's for my 7-march situation. In a 5-march situation, they probably don't make the cut. But if you're not under pressure on your own kills, if you're just trying to make sure you're helping your KD win, which probably should be more important anyways, in those cases you can consider the debuffers, and in those cases you can replace any of the commanders that we are talking about, and whichever debuffer you're looking at maxing, you can use them. And if you're looking for a new debuffer, I guess Tomiris is my favorite. If you're looking for a debuffer, the second one would be Sargon, and the third one would be Chandra. So maybe take a pick out of the three. Maybe don't actually go for Chandra, maybe actually go for Tomiris or Sargon. Now, with that note and this very long video, I'm going to say bye over here, and I will see you in the next one. Hope you can drop a like and subscribe. Bye.